of the DISA enterprise. A couple quick notes. If you have questions, please queue up at the microphone. As you can tell, it's hard to hear otherwise, and sort of contradictory, but silence your cell phones anyways. Okay. Let me introduce the panel here. To my right is Lieutenant Colonel Greg Griffin. He is Chief of DISA's current operations. To his right, Lieutenant Paul. I just demoted you.
That's right.
Colonel Paul Kraft, DISA Global Commander. To his right, Colonel Denise Brown, Commander, DISA Europe. Colonel Jay Matos, Commander, DISA PAC. And finally, Mr. C.J. Reed, Director for the DEC, Ogden. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mr. Scott Rudikowski.
Thank you, Dan. I'm going to try to moderate this. I'm a part of the Center for Operations, and so get to work with this august group day in and day out. Good? All right. Let's see if my clicker's going to work here.
You have to hang over.
There it is. Pardon me? Okay, so the panel members here said, okay, Rudikowski, don't show any slides, but I'm going to show a couple of them, just to put what we do and what they do in particular in context. So, the DISA and the computing environment. So this slide, again, shows that we are a global enterprise, fiber optic cables, some of which we own, some we lease. Of course, there's the satellite piece that we also help manage, and that should show up here. Okay, there we go. But anyway, you can see in those blocks on the bottom some of what we provide in the way of capabilities day in and day out. We host, several thousand applications, some of which are very huge applications. Defense Health Agency, DFAS applications in our DECs. We run access into the Internet, our Internet access points. We have multiple STEP sites and teleport sites that we manage to provide access to the deployed forces. And part of the point of this slide is it really is all about cloud services. In the past, when DISA started, it was pretty much providing transport to a post-camper station, dropping it off at a point of presence. Today, we deliver services to the desktop or to, as you can see there, lots and lots of mobility devices. Today, about 130,000 mobility devices. So these gentlemen and lady to my right, help us manage this day in and day out. And, this thing is going, come on, there you go. Okay, so just very quickly, how we are organized, within our quote-unquote DISA enterprise. So at Fort Meade is where we are located, Center of Operations. It's also where Greg Griffin is located, the DISA Command Center. This clicker is a little anxious. So what I will do here is just pull them all up at once. Maybe. Anyway, so I believe those are the DECs. So that shows 4 major DECs. So the photographer, I think, is in my line of sight. There you go. Thank you. There we go. So our field offices, in addition to our field commands and DECs, we have a point of presence at each of our commands. And you can see what they do, provide coordination and synchronization with the combatant commands. Again, there are the DECs. I just show 4 of the major DECs. We actually have 11 currently around the world. We are, this year, by the end of the fiscal year, closing 2 of them. We will be down to 9 DECs. These are our principal DECs who provide oversight over all of our computing environment. Okay, and we have a couple of special agencies you see up there, WACA, Joint Staff Support Center in the Pentagon. DISA, of course, is also getting involved with something called the Joint Service Provider, JSP. And that is all of it together. And I didn't touch on the field commands much because it didn't come up, but several of these folks are commanders at some of our field commands. But that together, collectively, is the big organization to provide C2 over DISA's enterprise. Now, another way to look at this, I'll go through this very quickly, get to my end state. There's the DODN. Obviously, we, DISA, provide a very large part of the DODN, our DISA infrastructure. The DODN, of course, connected to the Internet access points. My clicker's trying here. It's going backwards and forwards. There you go. So Internet access point. We'll talk about this a little bit. We have 10 locations around the world. A lot of sensors located there. Colonel Paul Kraft at DISA Global specifically manages access to the Internet. We also are working to develop a cloud access point, and we have access to our... Let me do something here real quick. I'm just going to have you click it.
Next.
So anyway, this is a big picture of, in part, our structure for managing what we do to operate and assure DISA's enterprise. And you can see there around that DoD information network, that DODN, that red line around that cloud, trying to represent the joint regional security stacks. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But you can see the regional field commands. You can see the DISA Command Center, kind of the head of our command and control capabilities, and, of course, the DISA Global, et cetera. So, next slide. So let me turn this over to Greg Griffin here, who works at the DISA Command Center, runs our current ops. Greg, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Greg Griffin, Chief. Can you hear me? All right, there we go. Greg Griffin, I'm Chief of Current Operations in the DISA Command Center. And so Mr. Rudakowski has done a great job of laying out just the pure scope of DISA's infrastructure and architecture. And that, on a daily basis, translates into a lot of information coming in very, very quickly. And you can see, if you look at the left-hand side of the chart, on the operate portion of this, we've got lots of statistics. We've got 10 million alarms. We've got thousands of trouble calls that come in, and 22,000 changes that happen on a daily basis. And then if you flop all the way over to the right-hand side, you'll see on the defensive side, we've got hundreds of millions of events and blocks that happen on a daily basis. Channeling down into, on both of those layers, you'll see that we are slowly using automation and using the field commands, who are the first ones who receive this information, to filter through what's going on and what's happening out there, to be able to report up those things that meet criteria that the commander has designated, or the director has designated, as important for him to be able to synchronize this network. He reports that all up to the command center, which then paints that picture for him in daily reports that we provide to him, so he can make risk and resource-based decisions in order to be able to tie our acquisition process into the gaps that we have on the network, or things that are being exploited or weaknesses that we have found that we need to provide more to our customers. And so we provide that picture up to him, and then he provides us guidance, which is then formed into orders, which synchronizes the operations that as they flow down to the field commands and ensures that we operate in a synchronized manner. Now, it's not just fire and forget on the orders. We do a meticulous job of ensuring that these don't conflict with one another on the network, having multiple things happening at the same time. And with 22,000 changes a day, that is a full-time job. We have teams at the DISA command center level, but also that are at each of the field command levels to make sure that we're communicating and synchronizing all of those actions to ensure that we don't have any fratricide on the network and to reduce any potential interruption to our user base. On the right-hand side in particular, we start looking at Defend, that when we receive the different tippers and intelligence from the various agencies, but also from the analysis that's being done at the field commands, we ensure that we produce the orders and the audit trail to be able to make sure that we are acting in a way that we can not only synchronize, but also to be able to audit to find out what happened if there is an unintended consequence of a certain action. All of those things, we're doing this 24/7, 365 in an operations center that's manned at about 90 folks, spread over 3 shifts. So that is the tempo of operations, and making sure that we keep the commander, the director, updated on everything that's going on, and providing him that situational awareness, and then making sure that his directives are carried out through the organization is our primary function at the DCC.
Okay, thank you, Greg. And again, just a day in the life. You can see the activity that goes on. And again, as Greg said, not a lot of people. So we are always looking for smarter ways, better tools, automation, integrated to do things smarter and better. Okay, here you go. Paul.
Thank you all for coming. Just a couple quick points. I want to bring it up a level first and then go down into how it really works from a command and control of both how to operate, secure, and defend the DISN from our DISA perspective. First, if I could draw us back to Joint Pub 312, I think we're all familiar with that in terms of DODN operations, DCO, and OCO, and how it really works in theory. What we have here, though, is what I'm showing are the functions within that document on what is done where, according to the circles. DODN operations is very mission-focused, but threat-agnostic. DCO is mission-focused, threat-specific, and then effects-focused, mission-specific for OCO. What you see in blue is what DISA Global Operations functions are. So we definitely don't design. That's not our job. We don't big B build. That's really what acquisition operations do. But we are definitely in the mode of config, secure, operate, I'll say little s sustain, because many of that is still very much done contractual and with COTS, and also maintain. Our job clearly is to provide mission assurance for major operations, so named operations, along with anything from nuclear command and control, global missile defense, airborne ISR, access to the internet. All those missions that are ongoing are things that we're focused on, along with a capability that was brought in a couple years ago, which is our ability to do some hunting operations. That we have a very robust cyber fusion cell that does that operations. And as we get into the area where those circles converge, that's where it gets exciting. So in the DCO world is where you see the convergence of both DODN operations and offensive cyberspace operations, where we get into what was used to be called information assurance, now called cybersecurity, now called some cyber defense and DCO. Some people call it little d defend, which is very much from a passive signatures-based perspective, and then we have big D defend. I'll say another version of Title 10 that gets into what Cyber Command is doing. So obviously we at the table representing DISA, we do more of I'll say the little d defend, but with the integration of Cyber Command, Joint Force Headquarters DODIN and what the EOCs now do with the cyber protection teams, we're now able to provide an active defense with a capability that we had not seen before that really and truly enables us to do the best DCO capability that we can. There are 6 DODIN CPTs aligned, each one aligned. There's one aligned regionally to PAC, one aligned regionally to EUR, and then 4 that are, I'll say, globally aligned, that are providing us that real, no-kidding, game-changer capability for the defense of the DISA and the DODIN on behalf of DoD. We obviously are working with Cyber Command and NSA, and that's about all I can say in this forum. Going further down the line, but if you'd like to know what we're doing at DISA Global, please come on out to St. Louis and check us out. Next slide, please. Now, this is a little bit of a build, so I'm going to need some help. So one thing we had to do for C2 was look at how we could provide the best integration possible in order to be truly proactive in our efforts. So if I could have someone hit build once. Next slide. First, let's start with DCO. And so that capability and those function in there, both passive and active defense, is one function that is now on our operations floor. This is not, for DISA Global, this is not operations as normal. Build. Before, it was very much just focused on circuits and DODIN operations and red lights and green lights and making things function to be on and flowing. Build. But now we really had 3, I'll say, we were an 8-division brigade. We collapsed on ourselves for efficiencies and effectiveness down to really a 3-division brigade, but we integrated operations. So on our operations floor, we now have DCO sitting right next to the DODIN operator, sitting right next to the network engineer 855. So as opposed to having 3 changes potentially going on in 3 different rooms at the global level, all that is now integrated in a collaborative sense in one singular operations center, so we have better control of change management, configuration management, and configuration control. Build. A big part of that, and another game changer for us, is not only are we a consumer of intel from our agency partners, but we're also a producer of intel. In the very near future, we're going to have a large number of intel analysts that are embedded with us, producing even more intel than we already do for the DODIN on behalf of our customers, and tippers that we send out to the regional field commands, and also to the services, and also to the COCOMs. Next build. A big part of that is to make sure that we're ensuring to provide that network assurance, again, that standard DISA uptime, circuit uptime, and how many 9s can we do for services. Build. To provide that mission assurance to enable, again, global missile defense, nuclear command and control, airborne ISR, unified capabilities to the warfighter. Build. And by integrating the engineering staff in there, that's where we really get after a control mechanism for configuration control and for network assurance and mission assurance. That's where it all comes together, integrated into a single C2 model. Again, if you'd like more information on this, please see me after, or even come down to St. Louis and see how it is operating live. Thank you very much.
So anyway, St. Louis, actually Scott Air Force Base, Illinois. Colonel Kraft's organization, for years and years, we've called it DISA CONUS. A little bit of a misnomer. So we recently put out an order saying, hey, this officially, he is being called, his organization, the DISA Global Operations Command, because of his global mission, managing most of the DISN, that IP infrastructure, the voice network that we have in the near future, and what's beginning right now, of course, is the management of the joint regional security stacks at that strategic layer. So, big organization. They get to move into a brand new building on Scott Air Force Base that is really going to be something. So that's going to happen in June officially. But anyway, so Paul plays a critical role in all of this. But we have our regional field commands, critical to what we do in providing our capabilities out into the operational theater. So, Colonel Brown, you want to take it over?
Okay.
Can y'all hear me? All right, just checking. So, Scott, first I want to thank you for moderating this. I know this is your daily challenge, moderating the 5 of us here at the table on a daily basis. So, if we can go to the next slide, please. So what I'm going to discuss today is, first of all, I'm from DISA Europe. In 2013, we established the first Enterprise Operations Center, which was part of the JIE effort. Our core roles right now, so when we talk about what the DNC does and what DISA Global does, I'll try to tie that into this brief. So we operate and defend the DODN. We do both DODN and DCO operations, and we do this in support of 2 combatant commands, EUCOM and AFRICOM. So one thing I want to highlight here, though, while we are the field command, field office in support of EUCOM, we only do the Enterprise Operations Center portion in support of AFRICOM. AFRICOM has their own field office commanded by Colonel Haggard. So as we go through this slide, we'll focus starting on the middle. Can I borrow your pointer? We'll focus on this portion right here. So this is where the EOC, so we have the DNC role, which is now nested and merged into our Enterprise Operations Center. And that will eventually feed into the DODN command. And at this point in time, that's provisional. And so the core efforts of this, the Enterprise Operations Center and the DODN command is really these 6 tasks right here. It's all about plan, monitor, assess, synchronize, coordinate, and deconflicting priorities. So we receive all of our priorities and directions from the combatant command. They provide us their directions, and then we coordinate here with the DISA Enterprise, which is really going back to the DCC. It's going to DISA Global as well as the DEX. And then from there, we help do priorities and synchronization in support of these combatant commands. And then when you start pulling over here, we then begin working with the theater service operations centers. Right now, we only do synchronization with them. We do not have task and authority over those elements. That is something that will evolve as we become a DODN command and we work through Joint Force Headquarters DODN. But today, we do synchronize efforts with them. And so the key takeaway from this is, as you look at how DISA C2's the enterprise, not to pull something from the past, but we say it takes a village to raise a family. Well, it is a pretty significant village that's C2 in the DISA enterprise, as well as the DODN. And so it is a team sport. It's a team effort. And so as we go through this panel, what I hope is that you'll start seeing and connecting the dots between Ops, the DCC, Global, the field commands, and then one of the DEX. And so from there, I'm going to hand it over to Jay Matos, unless you wanted to say something.
No, you're good. Thanks, Denise.
Hey, good afternoon, Colonel Jay Matos, Commander out DISA PAC out in Ford Island, Hawaii. Again, so I think we've heard from the previous commanders that the focus of their respective areas. Again, PACOM's a little bit different. We operate in that degraded intermittent environment where you have various land masses across the Pacific that we have to make sure that it's connected. And again, the same functions. We have to make sure that operations for the DISN is out there and they're defended, properly and securely. But again, as you operate in that degraded environment or potentially degraded environment with those separate land masses, it becomes a different challenge that we have to take into account when we work with PACOM, the DCC, to support the DISN. Much like Denise, we take a lot of our guidance from the PACOM JCC. Obviously, we're in direct support of PACOM and what they do in their operations. But we also take significant guidance from the DCC as well, giving them down. And as we get into it now, the Joint Force Headquarters DODN, we stood up as a DODN command, the first provisional DODN command in the Pacific. So now that when you talk about the C2. One of the challenges we have as an EOC, there's no authorities that come with being the EOC. There's no authorities that come with being the DISA field office or DISA at all because it's a combat support agency. There's no authorities. But under the DODN command, that's starting to change a little bit. JFHQ DODN has Title 10 authority over the service cyber components, which we can leverage while we operate and defend the network in the Pacific. We can go back to JFHQ DODN again to leverage with the service cyber components for directive action, whereas in the past it's really been a recommendation, a coalition of the willing per se to get stuff done. One of the big challenges I think that we look for help from industry in going forward is how do we use how do we get that mythical cyber cop, that cyber situational awareness. I know there's been a lot of work done on that, but at some point we need to come up with that solution that we can all agree upon, that what cyber situational awareness is and what it consists of, and how can we share that and utilize that, both supporting industry but also within the DoD. The big challenge we face is you can't just go out. There's no Best Buy that we can go to and order a big thing of situational awareness. Everybody has got a different perspective, a different requirement, but there's got to be a core set of requirements that we all need to, that we hope industry can help us, once we define them, that industry can help solve and provide to us and get through there. Another big challenge we face in this is just the Intel integration. How do we between the various Intel sources at the national level, the PACOM level, how do we integrate that intelligence not only to defend our network, but in some cases to operate it as well? So I think the last one we're looking for is, again, there's a lot of tools out there. Everybody has a different set of tools, and DISA's got a job of making sure that we all have a standard set. But again, we're looking for the best of breed on those defensive tools and on those operational tools that we can all utilize to better inform the network, operate the network, and defend the network. But again, DISA headquarters has a big job making sure we don't go off on a tangent and buy our own. It's got to be a kind of a unique one. But again, that's where we need the help, I think, from industry is cyber situational awareness, increased, improved CPT and defense tools, and the Intel integration. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to C.J. Reed to explain what the decks do to support DISA.
And if I could, so Colonel Matos at DISA Pacific, he is also the COOP, Continuity of Operations Capability for DISA Global. That means if sitting there right near St. Louis, if Paul Kraft is taken out by one of those Category 5 tornadoes, it turns over to Jay Matos. But we also, I should say, and maybe Colonel Brown or Colonel Matos, you can touch on this, but the whole concept of follow the sun, incidents happen somewhere in Europe. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Okay, so when we look at the DISA Tier 2 support, we are doing a follow-the-sun model. And so what that means is we have Tier 2 engineers that sit in global, PAC, and Europe, and it follows the sun. But that doesn't mean that the Tier 2 in Europe is only working on Europe Tier 2 problems. At any given time, Europe can be working on a Pacific problem, Europe can be working on a stateside problem, and vice versa between global and PAC. And so that's what we do with the follow the sun. So it's always on. There's always that higher level troubleshooting available, and it has been very beneficial. And I think the key takeaway is our mission partners, those combatant commands we support, are very comfortable with that level of support, and they don't see it. They don't know that the problem in Europe is being worked in CONUS. They don't know the problem in the Pacific is being worked in Europe, which is critical, and that's why when I talk about the village, that's the village running the DISN. Good? Okay.
Okay, good, thanks. And also, I know Colonel Kraft mentioned the CPTs. DISA is, quote-unquote, assigned 6 DoDN CPTs, cyber protection teams. That's 39 either Air Force, Marines, soldiers, etc., mostly enlisted folks who make up those cyber protection teams. Officially, the CPTs are OPCON to Joint Force Headquarters DoDN. They are trained and equipped by their individual service. However, when they get assigned to, let's say, Jay Matos out in the Pacific, he's the one that really takes them under his wing, make sure they're trained, make sure they have a place to work out of, and he works really the details of how they get on a different mission. Any comments on that, Jay? CPTs?
Yeah, so the CPTs, so we have that, and then now with JFHQ Doden, one of the challenges we'll talk about is they're OPCON to JFHQ Doden. All Doden CPTs are OPCON. So working out the relationship, being able to task that CPT in a timely fashion. When they're on mission, they're assigned take-on to us, but we have to request that take-on relationship per the orders. But again, I think it builds a lot of synergy having them co-located with us at DISA PAC because we have that CNDSP capability. So the data, the information they pull from the sensors in their CNDSP role is quickly and easily shared with the CPT. So when they've conducted a mission, we've seen just a great synergy between the CPT and the CNDSP are performing similar roles. CNDSP more of a broad-based mission, the CPT more of a point-based mission. But again, they're able to share information as the CPT comes back. It's able to share information with the CNDSP they found, and vice versa. So it's a very synergistic and a very again well-run, well coordinated effort there on the CNDSP part. Like I said, the challenge is just making sure that the tasking where we can employ those guys and getting that speeding process up. Because again, we work at the speed of cyber. We need to deploy those teams quickly and get them out the door and onto the mission. But again, they're a great force multiplier in what we're trying to do and defend the network. And I think with the 6 Doden worldwide, I think we're going to really have the chance to do both a wide and a point defense in a much more timely and effective manner.
Thanks, Jay. And I mentioned that Colonel Kraft has this beautiful new facility that he's moving into with his staff. But Jay Matos over here, his headquarters on Ford Island, right there in Pearl Harbor, has the best office in all of DISA. Glass on 2 sides, second floor. He's overlooking, the submarines and ships coming. It's not too bad. Okay. Anyway, enough of that. Okay, I won't say anything about Colonel Brown being over there in Stuttgart in Europe.
Great beer.
So 2 years ago, the DECs, DISA's Enterprise Computing Centers, were realigned and assigned to DISA operations. So the operational pieces of that structure out there at those 11 DECs came underneath the command and control and the operation of DISA operations. So, and the thought there was that, again, it's about one enterprise. It's what we do with transport networks, but all of it connected and integrated with what we do in the computing environment. So we have one of our DEC directors here, C.J. Reed. He's out at DEC Ogden, which is not a bad place either, because he is a snow skier. That's right. But anyway, C.J., go ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, just special thanks to these soldiers to my left. I know what it means to wear the uniform every day and the sacrifices these guys make, so we appreciate for the, even the Marines, we appreciate them. Yes, have to recognize the Marines. So seriously, special thanks to those that wear the uniform. As mentioned, C.J. Reed, DEC Ogden. We hear a lot in DISA. We talk about the transport layer. We talk about the networks. When you first hear of DISA, that's the first thing you usually think of is the transport, satellites, getting the network. But at the end of that network, there's usually someone trying to extract data. And the data centers, that's what we're there for. We're there to provide that data center processing so that soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines can get their data efficiently, effectively out there on the battlefields and wherever they may be. The DECs, again, I'm giving one representation for DEC Ogden, but again, this applies across the 4 primary DECs that are out there. So as you look at the slide, next slide, when you look at the slide, again, I'm here just speaking on behalf of all the DECs, but this just gives you a flavor of DEC Ogden. We're involved in lots of applications that we support out there, over 300 plus. We're involved in logistics, distribution, payroll of all types. If you're a contractor, you come through us to get paid. If you're a civilian or military, you're getting paid through DFAS, the financial systems. We're heavy in logistics systems with the Air Force as well as DLA and those things. Direct support for weapon systems that are running out there for missiles, healthcare, enterprise systems you've also heard earlier was talked about today by Mr. Halverson's Defense Enterprise email, which many of you out there use. So we're involved in all those aspects. Just some GWIS numbers. As you look at the slide there, we're supporting over 3.5 million users currently. We run each of the decks out there are running underneath ITIL. Many of you understand the ITIL process. That's one that we got involved in about 9-10 years ago now with DLA, one of our larger customers that came on board and says, we're not coming to a deck unless you guys get yourself ITIL compliant. It's a great process. We drank the Kool-Aid. It works. It actually does put standardization within our processes. We manage over 2,000 operating environments, and that's growing. One you also heard from HP earlier. They're great partners with ours. We've partnered with many folks, HP and Oracle, to bring on converged systems. That's one of the latest we're doing today for the Army. They're currently migrating their logistics systems, plus their payroll systems and their finance systems into DEC Ogden. Again, they're doing that using converged technology that's out there. So, again, that's been new on the forefront for us to go down that road. Again, you can see some of the GWIS numbers. We run over 500,000 batch jobs weekly. We do still have the plethora out there of server base, plus the superclusters we talked about, the converged technology, plus the mainframes are still alive and well. Oftentimes you hear folks talk about mainframes are dinosaurs, should go away, but mainframes still have a part within our business scope out there with our customers. They're more or less than service to us. The technology has changed over the years. Under the command section, just a few GWIS numbers there. You can see that some of the systems we run there, over $1 billion annually through the EBS systems. That's DLA's log system. Transcoms, DPS, those of you in the military uniform and civilians of PCS, we run that system. You can see some of the numbers there. WAF, wide area work floor, if you do business with the government, small business, we run those applications there at Ogden. And you can see we do over $1 billion in invoices a day through that system alone. So, again, this is just small sampling. Next slide. You heard a lot about how do we defend. Again, these great compadres to my left talk about defending the network out there. But, again, once it gets past the network and gets into the DEC infrastructure, we have to defend the DEC. So how do we do that? So we have lots of tools out there. We oftentimes get accused from our customers of saying, it takes too long to get something up. You heard that from Mr. Halverson. It's too archaic with your current process of getting stuff stigged and scanned and getting authority to operate on the network within those. And I'm very much excited to hear those kind of terms to where we can make the process better. I'm all for that. But nevertheless, we do go through that process in order to get systems onto the network. We use various tools that are out there. Some of those you've heard of that was mentioned there by Mr. Halverson that we're using RMF. DICAP has been replaced with RMF, and that's what we're currently using. HPSS is another core set of applications that provide defensive capabilities that we're using today. ACAS is our primary network scanning tool that we use out there, managed by our headquarters. And then Blade Logic is our primary patch repository that we use out there. CMRS is the latest. If you heard those terminology, CMRS is what everything rolls up into. It actually gives us a risk score that we are actually be able to go out there with our customers and down to the application layer and say, okay, here's the vulnerabilities, here's what needs to be patched, fixed, or updated, and we are able to work with our customers to get those things fixed. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, CJ. And I should mention, again, DISA has 4 brigades. 3 of the brigade commanders are sitting up at the table here. The other brigade commander, Colonel Jim Terranetti, he's an Army 06. He's got our DISA Central Command organization out of Tampa. And, of course, he oversees all of what DISA does in that very active theater. A lot of what is happening in Southwest Asia, and he spends probably half of his time, in that theater helping with operations. So I think we're ready to take questions. Don't be shy. These folks stayed up all night thinking about what they could answer.
Hi, I have a question for the UCOM commander. Do you have a similar relationship to PACOM with your JCC, and how will that change when the JCC in Europe becomes a one-star command?
Can you go to my slide real quick?
Yes, please. Oh, one more. Go forward. I'm sorry. There you go. All right, so, and that's one thing I was not able to highlight there. Who has the pointer again? We lost the pointer. We lost control. Okay. So this right here, if you look at that where it says US UCOM, that should also say the Joint Cyber Center. I think it does. I just can't read at that angle. So that is where we also take priorities and direction. So in UCOM, which may be a little different from PACOM, I'm not quite sure, but in UCOM, the Joint Cyber Center is a dual-hatted position. So it's the UCOM J6 and the UCOM Joint Cyber Center. So we already work very closely with the UCOM J6 as the EOC prior to them establishing their JCC. So, and that was really, with the J6 side, that was in large part with the DODN. So what's really happened is now that they've established that JCC and they're really starting to do the DCO, the OCO operations from a DCO perspective, we're actually working better with them from an EOC with the DCO tasks that we have, our CNDSB plus the DCO. So the relationship has actually gotten better, and I think we are getting better in that theater. General Lynn mentioned yesterday that Joint Force Headquarters DODN deployed their first JTF into the UCOM area, and they were working and nested inside of the JCC. And then we worked also very closely with that JTF from an EOC and a DISA perspective. You don't get to ask questions.
Sorry.
No, I'm kidding. Okay.
So
She was on this panel last year with us.
So, good afternoon, guys. So I have one question for any one of you. If there was any one thing that you could change to make this C2 construct better, what would that be and why?
We can go down the line. I think the challenge we have, I think the biggest challenge we face is the networks out there are owned by the services. So if we want to direct any changes, we want to direct any actions, either operations or defense of the network, the services still own a trump card to say, no, we can't, and that's where we have to go back to JFHQ DODN. So I think that really inhibits our ability to respond quickly in a regional fashion, because we have to go back to 24th Air Force for the Air Force, or the McNosk, or MAR4 Cyber, or the NICTAM, 10th Fleet on the Navy side. So that ownership of the services, which again is still vital and understandable at the level from trying to command and control it, again slows it down and makes it much more challenging for JFHQ DODN and everybody involved when we have to utilize when we have to go back through that extra layer of service scrutiny on orders and directives.
Yeah, and I'll chime in on what Jay said. When he's talking about the service components, what we're seeing is there's a mismatch with the C2 construct. And what I say with that is we're regional, but the only regionally aligned cyber service components are the Army. The other ones are all centralized. So that doesn't match with a regionally aligned DODN construct. And so I would say that's probably one of our biggest challenges as we work through this. And then we have to be careful, because then we are adding layers, like Jay said. So not only are we mismatched as far as our alignment, we're continuing to add layers to get at the cyber challenge that we have. And we just have to be careful. I'm not saying it's too many layers yet, but we need to make sure that we don't continue to create these layers that later become eventually a bureaucracy.
You want to say anything to that, Paul?
So I'll say I don't necessarily have the same challenges regionally because we're dealing globally. For us, we go directly to the Air Force, the Army, to NETCOM, to the Marine Corps on changes. So those happen pretty fast. But for our active defense side, kind of more so to Jay's other point, on CPTs. We're looking for, because we're working at net speed, if we want immediate high-end net defense, we need to have immediate high-end ability to task and move and maneuver the cyber protection teams that are aligned to us, living, breathing, sitting next to us, that if we can't tell the person to our right, I need you to do this now, that's a challenge if we have to go up and ask and then pontificate and then come back down and get a response. That mashup is working better, and we're working through the C2. Obviously, between how we're embedded with JF2 DODN now and how we're aligned to Cyber Command now and to the DoD CIO now, so everybody has many bosses, and we have to take care of the customer. But I think we probably need to tighten the alignment a little bit better between the cyber protection teams at the DODN level and the global and regional cyber commands that we do have. Thank you.
So at the headquarters level, at the command center, you'll see in the just above the smack middle of that slide is that GOC. Well, that GOC is composed of two different things: the DISA command center and the DODN JDOC. So getting better refinement of where the boundaries are between our authorities and where we are, how we carry those out is probably our biggest challenge within the command center, because there's a number of things that flow up particularly from the regionals that is not DISA, so the DCC doesn't have a purview there. However, the JDOC it's not a C2 issue or a command and control issue, so therefore they're not tracking it. And so to be able to close that gap between the two of us and better refine that line is really where we need to get to go in the room on the 6th floor at the headquarters.
And that questioner was recently retired Air Force Colonel Patty Rinaldi, instrumental in helping us stand up Joint Force Headquarters DODN. And again, the whole idea of a U.S. Cyber Command, with their subordinate commands, not one of which Joint Force Headquarters DODN, which has C2 of DODN Ops and Defensive Cyber Operations Internal Defensive Measures. And you can see on that slide up there, unity of command, unity of effort. We certainly need that in today's cyber world where things happen at internet speed. So JIE, Joint Information Environment, I think most of us believe in that it should happen. Collapse all these disparate networks so we really have, a holistic one joint network that has a unified command and control structure. So over time, we think that'll happen. We still have a ways to go. So any other questions? Okay, I'd like to thank these panel members and Lockheed Martin for introducing us. We can't do this without our industry partners. Lockheed Martin has a big part to play in what we do day in and day out in operating and assuring our network. They are resident, present at every one of our command centers, to include the DISA command center. So, they do a great job for us. So anything else, panel members? Thank you all. Go ahead.
So just real quick, I saw there was General Kemp in the back. So we clearly need to have our industry partners partnering with us, but we also have great support from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps that are partnering with us also. Active component and also reserve component. We have a very heavy mix of reserve component folks that we could not work without and get our job done without the support from the reserve side, along with the industry, along with the active force to do what we do. So I just want to make sure we shout out to both our industry partners and our reserve counterparts to make it happen day in and day out. Thank you.
Thank you all.